I'm Alma Arara Mountain, and the year my world cracked cleanly into before and after was the one when I turned 13. If you wanted me to mark the exact instant my family decided I was background scenery in my own story, it wouldn't be some slow dawning, just a sticky note stuck to the fridge. Stay at a friend's back in a week. Love you. No signature, no explanation. Only my mother's graceful handwriting that read like indifference. They headed to Florida the morning of my birthday. My older sister, Jasmine Mountain, uploaded a picture with her pink suitcase and a cheerful caption about family time, while Lily Mountain, my little sister, followed it with palm tree emojis. I waited on the porch, backpack balanced on my knees, convinced the note was only the beginning and that someone, anyone, was about to arrive. An aunt, a neighbor, a stroke of luck. No one did. The streetlights flickered on and a dog barked at me like I didn't belong on my own front steps. I warmed a burrito I didn't even like and ate it at the counter, pretending the microwave's buzz counted as conversation. By the second day, I kept insisting it was all a mistake. By the fourth, another thought started whispering. One I wanted to push away. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Being the middle child had always meant serving as the quiet bridge between the star act and the finale. Jasmine collected awards and varsity letters. Lily had dance recital, braces, and parties with color-matched cupcakes. I had responsible, which adults really used to mean unseen. But being forgotten on purpose introduced a whole new kind of silence. 6 days in, I left the library with a tower of borrowed books stacked like armor. The heat shimmered so hard it blurred even my shadow. That's when a glossy black car slowed to the curb. Its windows sliding down like something from someone else's life. Alma, surprise in a voice I half recognized. Uncle Richard, the rich one who'd quit family holidays before I could multiply double digits. Mom always called him conceited, which I now understand was her code for he keeps his boundaries. His eyes took in my backpack, sweat-stuck hair, and the tight smile I used as a shield. Why are you out here alone? Where are your parents? Florida, I said. The word felt absurd, like telling him they'd flown to another planet. And you're here, I see, he said under his breath. Whatever followed sounded like a comment I wasn't meant to catch. And then came the words, get in. You're not walking anywhere tonight. Every safety lecture I'd ever heard about strangers echoed through my head. But my empty stomach, after 3 nights of instant noodles and one of dry cereal, offered its own louder logic. Hunger counts as danger, too. They carried the scent of leather and something sharp and new. Not citrus or perfume, just the smell of money that hasn't gone stale. He drove to a diner with cracked red booze and pies trapped beneath glass domes. When the burger and milkshake arrived, I stared as though they might vanish if I blinked too long. He didn't push me to talk. He let me eat first, then asked about school, about friends, about what I cared about. History, I said, though mainly the parts everyone misremembers. That answer made him smile slightly, as if he just discovered a small secret about me. When we reached my street, he didn't bother to park, just idled and told me to pack a bag. I blinked. What? You're not staying alone on a sofa in a dark house while your parents shop for sunscreen. Pack, Elma. Some moments open up the world like it has hidden hinges. The door turned and his home felt like another planet entirely. The guest bed looked too soft to touch. I perched carefully on its edge, afraid even to wrinkle the blanket. He leaned against the frame and raised an eyebrow, planning to sleep upright forever. I whispered that I didn't want to mess up his sheets. They can be washed, he said with a half-smile that held warmth instead of mockery. Things exist to be used, not feared. Morning came with orange juice poured into a real glass. At home, our cups were sun-fed souvenirs that still smelled faintly of plastic. I held his glass as if it might break from being looked at wrong. It's just juice, not a legal agreement, he teased. Drink. When the teacher asked who would attend my meeting that week, he didn't pause before answering. I will. The calm weight of those 2 words loosened something inside me that had been clenched for months. I didn't know what to do with generosity. When he bought jeans and a sweater, I hid the tags. convinced he'd want to take them back. When he handed me lunch money, I saved it and ate crackers. Because spending felt like trespassing. It took 12 days before he found me in the kitchen at midnight, crouched over a cereal box. "Why?" he said from the doorway. "Are you rehearsing to be a raccoon?" I told him I didn't want to take too much. He opened the fridge, scooped pasta into a bowl, warmed it, and pushed it toward me. "If it's in this house, it belongs to everyone who lives here," he said. "That means you, too." I nodded, swallowing against the sting in my throat, determined not to let tears fall into the pasta. Crying seemed extravagant, and I didn't want to feel indebted. I kept expecting the front door to shake with my parents' arrival, for them to demand I come back like something borrowed too long. But the days kept passing. Then weeks, no knock, no call. Jasmine filled her feed with beach pictures captioned about eternal sisterhood, and Lily posed with shells pressed to her cheek. My name never showed up beneath any of it. Uncle Richard came with me to the school conference where the counselor perched on a metal chair and said phrases like quiet, potential, and underengaged. He didn't argue, just took notes, and afterward bought a desk so I'd have a place to study that wasn't the floor. He arranged an eye appointment I hadn't known I needed. And after that came dentist, doctor, haircut, routine care I didn't realize was routine. He never once said I owed him anything. He just called it maintenance, as though I was someone worth keeping in working order. At 13, I still pushed limits. One Saturday, I stayed out late with a friend, forgetting to text because I didn't know what counted as curfew. When I tiptoed in around midnight, waiting for the explosion, he handed me a sandwich. "Glad you're alive," he said. "Next time, send a text. Otherwise, I'll assume you're in a ditch and go buy a shovel." The even tone was more disarming than anger. It sounded like care, but with structure. Not everything was rules and schedules. Sometimes he'd bring me to his office, tell me to observe how people spoke to one another. "Half of success is tone and handshake," he murmured once, clasping a client's hand. "The rest is showing up when everyone else invents excuses." He tossed it off lightly, but it stayed with me, a kind of map. That first holiday under his roof, I expected a token card and a polite smile. Instead, he handed me a leather-bound journal with my initials pressed in gold. "Write down what you notice," he said. "Even the silly things, especially those." I traced the cover's texture, half afraid it might bite. "Thank you," I managed, though the words came out awkward. I wasn't used to owning something permanent. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a photo. My parents, Jasmine and Lily, in identical pajamas beside a flawless tree. The caption read, "Mountain Traditions." No tag, no message, not even a "we miss you." I stared until the picture blurred into color and light. I glanced down at the journal resting on my lap and flipped open to the first blank sheet. I wrote, "Things here are meant to be used, not feared." Then, if something is inside this house, it belongs to everyone who lives within it. Finally, I added, "I am in this house." The words looked too assertive, like I'd borrowed someone else's courage. Still, when I shut the cover and traced my initials again, something faint stirred inside me. Unfamiliar, but warm. It wasn't safety. Not yet. But maybe the draft of it drawn in pencil outlines. I didn't know then that the diner booth and this little book would become the hinges that turned everything. Years later, in a place that smelled of leather and law, those pages would be my backbone when others scrambled for footing. For now, I was just 13, curled into sheets that whispered clean instead of weary, starting to learn one impossible truth. I wasn't disposable. I hadn't been forgotten, only misplaced. And someone finally had found my tab and slid me where I belonged. By the time I hit 14, Uncle Richard had reached two conclusions about me. First, my posture was atrocious. Second, under that slouch, I carried promise. He'd tap my shoulder whenever I folded inward. "Stand tall, Elma. You're not punctuation. People believe you more when you look like you already believe yourself." At first, it sounded like a line from a poster. But eventually, I started catching myself mid-hunch, straightening up, pretending confidence until it began to feel real. Teachers noticed. I began speaking up, raising my hand, even joining debate club after he bribed me with pizza. At my first competition, my voice wobbled like bad speakers. But I still won, arguing that cats made better pets. When the judge announced it, I spotted Uncle Richard in the back, grinning the quiet kind of grin that said, "See, told you." At home, he wasn't just a caretaker. He was a collection of lessons disguised as daily life. He never preached about drive or gratitude. He lived them. When I asked for a new phone, he said, "Sounds great. How much have you saved?" I blinked. "None." "Then you'll appreciate it twice as much once you've earned it." So, I got my first job bagging groceries. My first paycheck read 73116 and I waved it like a trophy. He didn't take it. He drove me to the bank instead. "Two-part rule," he said. "Save half, spend half. That way you can enjoy today without robbing tomorrow." I rolled my eyes back then, but later I'd realized that one sentence was the spine of everything I built. Holidays used to be something I dreaded. Holiday dinners used to feel like theater productions I'd never auditioned for. At Uncle Richard's, Christmas carried a quieter rhythm, but it was full in a truer way. His gifts weren't extravagant, just chosen with care. A gently used copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a fountain pen that felt substantial in my hand, a scarf he claimed matched my debate face. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with photos from the mountains. My parents, Jasmine and Lily, posing beside palm trees and tables that looked staged for glossy spreads. No one ever wrote, "Wish you were here." The hurt still stung, but it no longer emptied me out the way it used to. It reminded me instead that I was learning what family could look like when it was end all for show. One Christmas, he passed me a small box. Inside was a silver keychain engraved Mountain and Carlton. "A work in progress," he said. I looked up confused. "A work in progress?" He smiled. "Because that's what both of us are. You're learning to build. I'm learning not to do it alone." Words failed, so I just hugged him. It was clumsy, like two people trying to remember an old language, but he didn't let go first. That night, in my journal, I wrote, "You don't need shared blood to share a home." By 16, he began taking me to his office during summers. I was terrified. Surrounded by pressed suits, shining desks, and people who carried themselves like gravity worked differently for them. During introductions, he leaned close and whispered, "Relax." They put their pants on one leg at a time. Some even fall over doing it. I laughed and the fear dissolved. That became our running joke whenever I felt small. "One leg at a time, kid." He taught me things no classroom ever touched. How to listen before answering. How to see what people meant instead of what they said. How to grip a hand like you meant it. "Half the world bluffs," he told me once. "The other half apologizes for existing. Learn to do neither." That was the first time I believed maybe I could build something more than just survival. At 17, the contrast between where I'd come from and where I was now felt sharp enough to draw blood. Jasmine filled her feed with college acceptance posts tagging everyone but me. Lily posed beside her new car, captioned, "Thanks, Mom and Dad." Her grin as glossy as the paint. I stared at that photo while Uncle Richard brewed tea and murmured, "They don't even check in." Not a single text, not even a happy birthday. He didn't glance up from his mug. "How long do you plan to wait for them to remember you?" The question cracked through the quiet like thunder in a closed room. I didn't answer, and he didn't expect me to. That night, I stopped waiting for the mountains to turn around. Instead, I began the long work of remembering myself. During senior year, Uncle Richard handed me a small box before prom. Inside lay a slender silver bracelet with a tiny engraved "A Don't chase approval, Elma." He said, "Chase peace. Approval is borrowed. Peace is something you keep." I didn't know it yet, but that line was a signpost for everything that would follow. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the showdown that would measure all his lessons. But in that moment, I just smiled, clasped the bracelet, and told him he sounded like a fortune cookie. He laughed. Then make sure you open it before it's stale. That night, beneath strings of lights and a DJ who loved volume more than rhythm, I laughed without checking if anyone noticed. No invisible leash pulling me back. No note taped to a fridge saying back in a week. Just me. Alma Mountain, unfinished but real, finally learning what it felt like to be seen. College had never been part of the script my parents wrote for me. Jasmine was the prodigy with scholarships. Lily the golden child with trophies and tiaras. And me, the one expected to be realistic. Family shorthand for don't hope too high. If not for Uncle Richard, I might have stayed inside that limitation. He didn't simply hand over tuition. He made me fight for every piece. We sat for hours at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets, loan guides, and financial aid forms until the numbers swam. Scholarships first, he insisted, grants second. My help fills the gaps, not the base. So, I hunted. There was a scholarship for left-handed students. I spent 2 weeks teaching myself to write lefty, another for descendants of beekeepers. I composed an essay on the sacred balance between bees and humans. Even though my only encounter involved sprinting away from one in 3rd grade, bit by bit, I stitched together a future. When the envelope from Western Summit University arrived, Uncle Richard examined it like a deal he'd personally brokered. "Congratulations," he said, his voice steady but proud. His eyes were bright when he said it. "Now go prove them right." Move-in day was chaos. Parents juggling boxes, balloons bobbing, everyone crying in doorways. Mine didn't come. Not a message, not even a good luck. Uncle Richard carried everything up 3 flights in the August heat, his shirt sticking to his back, but he refused to let me take the heavy ones. "This counts as my annual workout," he joked. "Don't tell my trainer I actually broke a sweat." When the room was finally set, I stood there taking in the mismatched sheets, the thrift store lamp, the faint bleach smell, and felt a pang twist deep inside. He must have noticed because he said softly, "Don't look for them here, Elma. Look forward. That's the direction you're headed." I could only nod, throat tight. Before leaving, he gave me a small envelope. Inside, a note in his neat block handwriting. "If you ever doubt you belong, check your reflection. You got here without them." I taped it inside my planner and kept it there all 4 years. Those first months were rough. I felt like an intruder in every class. The girl in second-hand shoes carrying detergent-scented bags instead of luxury ones. But Uncle Richard called every Sunday without fail, sometimes just to tease. "So Miss Dean's list, still living on ramen and determination?" "Barely, I'd say." "Good," he'd reply. "Struggle keeps you sharp." That rhythm steadied me. His voice was a kind of gravity. In my sophomore year, I met Ethan Cole, the kind of person who could make a room exhale. We met volunteering at a community garden. He was actually planting things. I was pretending to know how a shovel worked. He offered to show me and I rolled my eyes but let him. We started seeing each other months later slowly, carefully, but it was real. Ethan wasn't a hero type. He didn't try to save me. He respected me, and that meant more than I'd ever expected. During finals one night, he asked, "Why do you double-check everything, even the tiniest stuff?" I hesitated, then said, "Because for a long time I was the mistake nobody fixed." He didn't offer clichés. He just took my hand and said, "Then let's make sure no one overlooks you again." That was the moment I realized he truly saw me, not as the forgotten middle child, but as someone who'd carved out her own light. By junior year, an old ghost surfaced. Sabrina, Ethan's ex, the kind of girl who could turn remorse into theater. She started turning up at campus gatherings again, all smiles and polished charm, complimenting my clothes, while her eyes swept the room for an audience. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. But one night, she let it slip that Ethan had met her for coffee to help with a business plan. Later, when I asked, he told me the truth. "She reached out, said she needed advice," he said. I didn't think it was a big deal. It shouldn't have been, but that old sting of being replaced and forgotten came rushing back like a reflex I couldn't control. That night, Uncle Richard's words replayed in my mind. Half the world bluffs. The other half apologizes for existing. Do neither. So, I didn't accuse him, and I didn't plead. I simply said, next time, let her find someone else's generosity. Ethan nodded. No protest, no defensiveness. That quiet acceptance told me more than any speech could. By senior year, everything seemed to align like a long-delayed sunrise. I earned my degree in civil engineering, the same field Uncle Richard once described as the art of creating what endures. He sat in the front row at graduation, clapping so loud the dean actually paused to look up. Afterward, he handed me a modest silver pen. Use this to sign the contracts. You'll be proud of, he said. I smiled. Not my autograph. He chuckled.
One day. Build first, brag later. While others celebrated that night, I stayed in my dorm, rereading the journal he'd given me when I was 13. The pages were filled now. Lessons, tiny victories, scrolled gratitude. One line stood out like a heartbeat. If it's in this house, it belongs to the people in this house. That house wasn't a structure anymore. It was my life. And for the first time, I truly felt I lived inside it. After graduation, I joined a small engineering firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid and it was mine. Ethan found work in the same city, and for the first time, the path ahead felt like my own. Every Friday, Uncle Richard and I met for dinner. He'd lift his glass of whiskey and tease, "Look at you, Miss Mountain, scaling the ladder without tripping." I'd laugh and say, "Give it time. I still might." What I didn't want to see were the changes, the fatigue in his voice, the way he rubbed his shoulder after lifting grocery bags, the slight pause before remembering a familiar place. I told myself it was just age creeping in. I didn't know it was the quiet overture to everything about to break. Because the strongest people don't collapse in one dramatic fall. They fade first, quietly, almost gracefully, until you realize you've been carrying what they used to hold. It began subtly. The kind of change you tell yourself not to analyze. Uncle Richard started canceling our Friday dinners, claiming work was brutal lately. Words I'd never heard him use before. Then one evening, when I stopped by without calling, I found him asleep in his armchair at 8. The TV murmured an infomercial to no one. When I touched his shoulder gently, he startled awake, forcing a smile that came too quickly. "Long day," he said, voice thin. Guess I blinked too long. But the smile stopped short of his eyes. The signs multiplied. Prescription bottles lined the counter. His hand trembled slightly as he poured his coffee. He'd tell the same story twice in one evening. I noticed. He noticed me noticing. And together we slipped into a quiet pact of denial. He still checked in on me. Calm, steady, the same way he always had when I was learning to build a life from the ruins. "You're doing well at work," he told me once after I vented about a difficult client. "Just remember, jobs replace you in a week. People won't if you choose the right ones." That line struck deeper than any performance review. I didn't realize it was his way of preparing me for a world where he might not be there to say it. Months went by. My career gained traction. My footing felt firm. Ethan and I found a rhythm that worked. His marketing job, my engineering projects, both of us steady. But every time Richard brushed off a cough or waved away my concern, that steadiness cracked a little more. Then the day came, a Tuesday, the phone rang. A shaking voice on the line. "Ms. Mountain, this is Grace from Mr. Carlton's office. He collapsed during a meeting. They've taken him to St. Luke's Hospital." The drive blurred, just streaks of red lights and the drum-beat of my heart in my hands. When I finally reached his room, he looked impossibly small against all that white. Still, when he saw me, he managed a crooked grin. "Don't look so grim," he rasped. "Told them I wanted a free night stay. 5-star if you ignore the food." I tried to laugh, but my throat burned. "You scared me," I whispered. He shrugged faintly. "First time for everything." Then, softer still, "Sit, kid." He waited until the room settled into stillness. Just the quiet pulse of machines and the soft shuffle of footsteps somewhere beyond the door. "You know," he said, his voice raspier than I'd ever heard it. "I always thought your dad would be the one teaching you these things, how to stand tall, manage money, argue without raising your voice, but I'm glad it turned out to be me." "Don't talk like that," I whispered. "Like what?" "Like I couldn't finish." He gave that half smile again, the one that carried more comfort than words ever could. "Honest," he said, taking my hand, a rare gesture from him. "You've exceeded every single expectation anyone ever had for you, Alma. Just remember one thing." "What's that?" "You're not the extra piece. You never were." My vision blurred and I blinked fast, unwilling to let tears win. He caught the effort and smirked faintly. If you get these sheets wet, you're paying the dry cleaning bill. I laughed and the sound cracked halfway through. But for a heartbeat, it felt like the world had returned to normal. He stayed in the hospital a few nights, then came home, slower now, quieter, still pretending nothing had changed. We never brought up the scare again, but both of us knew something invisible had shifted between us. That final Christmas, he gave me a box wrapped in gold. Inside was the same leather journal he'd given me when I was 13. Only now it wasn't blank. Every page was filled. Short notes, advice, jokes, rough sketches, even taped restaurant receipts with scribbles like best burger of 2014. Still not worth the calories. The last page made me stop breathing for a second. His handwriting trembled but stayed legible. If they ever try to erase you again, remember this. You've already written your own chapter. I looked up, throat tight. You've been writing in this all these years? He shrugged. Couldn't let you keep all the good lines for yourself. I leaned in and hugged him. Not a careful one. A real one. He chuckled, murmuring, easy. You'll break a rib. But I held on a little longer. Because something in me knew it was the last time I'd hear that laugh in the same room. When the call came months later, I didn't pick up right away. It was early, the world still half asleep. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. On the other end, Grace's voice cracked. Miss Mountain, I'm so sorry. Richard passed away in his sleep this morning. The world went soundless as if someone had turned life's volume all the way down. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, phone still clutched in my hand, staring at the wall as if sheer focus could force the world back into order. He was supposed to be okay. He was supposed to keep cracking jokes about aging and cholesterol, not disappear overnight. The following days dissolved into a blur. Calls, documents, funeral arrangements. He'd named me executive. Naturally, of course he had. No one else would know the details that mattered. Which tie he called his serious one, which songs made him grimace, how much he despised lies and preferred simple white roses instead. The service was small and elegant, just the way he'd have wanted. A mix of old friends, a few colleagues, and those rare people who truly mattered. I stood near his photo, nodding through condolences that felt muffled, like I was underwater. And then they appeared. My parents, Jasmine, Lily, walking into the chapel as if it were a red carpet event. My mother hid behind oversized black sunglasses large enough to conceal both her eyes and her conscience. My father shook hands with strangers, offering solemn words about what a loss to the family it was, despite not having spoken to Richard in over 15 years. When they finally noticed me, their faces went through a storm of emotions. Shock, guilt, and calculation all tangled together. Alma, my mother gasped, clutching my hand. We had no idea you and Richard were so close. I pulled away gently. You never asked. My father cleared his throat, slipping into his practice tone. The one he used for church speeches and business deals. Your uncle was an extraordinary man, generous, successful, always a part of the family. That last word almost made me laugh out loud. Family. Jasmine's voice chimed in. Sugar over steel. So, do you know when the reading is? Uncle Richard was comfortable. Lily gave an exaggerated sigh, adjusting her pearl earrings. I just hope he wanted us to keep the family legacy together. The house, the cars, all that. For a second, I wondered if I was dreaming or trapped in some cruel play. He hadn't even been buried yet, and they were already circling the inheritance like scavengers scenting fresh spoil. I didn't bother responding. I simply turned and walked away. Within a week, the flood began. Texts, voicemails, social media requests. My mother's voice oozing false warmth. Honey, we really should reconnect. Family is all we have. Then a message from Jasmine slid into my DMS. We should talk about estate matters soon. Jasmine wrote while Lily sent an emoji that tried to make grief look fashionable. Not long after, Uncle Richard's attorney, Mr. Halpern, called. The will reading is scheduled for Monday morning. He said it may be eventful. Your uncle was very specific about what he wanted. I smiled faintly, fingertips grazing the worn edge of my journal. If they ever tried to erase you again, they were about to find out what happens when you confuse quiet with weakness. And I was about to keep my promise to myself and to the man who taught me how to stand tall. The law office smelled of leather, old money, and the faint satisfaction of justice. Heavy curtains, dark wood furniture, chairs that forced perfect posture. The air carried that hush where every breath felt like testimony. Mr. Halpern sat at the head of a long mahogany table. My family lined the opposite side, my parents, Jasmine and Lily. Wrapped in expensive mourning, my mother dabbed at invisible tears with designer tissues. My father folded his hands like a preacher, ready for donations. Jasmine's phone kept glowing beneath the table and Lily leaned close to whisper. Do you think he left us the house? I sat across from them, journal resting on my lap, heart steady, a plain black dress. No statement jewelry, no armor, I didn't need any. Halpern cleared his throat. We are here to review the last will and testament of Richard Carlton. His tone was precise. Deliberate, he began with the usual, debt settled, small donations to charities, gifts to long-term staff. My family fidgeted, trying to look patient, practically vibrating with greed. Then he turned a page regarding the remainder of Mr. Carlton's estate. Jasmine leaned forward, diamonds catching the light. Lily clasped her hands like she was waiting for divine favor. My father glanced at me, a smirk flickering, half pity, half warning. Halpern read slowly, each word crisp as glass. To my arranged relatives who remembered me only when my bank balance suited their needs, I leave nothing. The silence split the room. My mother gasped. Jasmine's mouth fell open. Lily blinked, stunned. He's joking, right? She whispered. Halpern didn't pause. He turned another page. To my niece, Alma Mountain, abandoned at 13, but never absent since. I leave the entirety of my estate. All assets, properties, accounts, and holdings. For one suspended moment, no one breathed. And then, like a single movement, four pairs of eyes locked on me. Jasmine was the first to break the silence, her voice sharp and trembling. That's impossible. He barely even knew her. I kept my tone steady. He knew me for 15 years. You just stopped paying attention. My father's face flushed crimson. You manipulated him. You poisoned him against his family. I rested my palm on the journal, fingertips tracing the soft, worn leather. No, I said quietly. You did that yourselves. The day you left me with a note on the fridge. Lily tried her practice sweetness. Come on, Elma. You're not really planning to keep everything, are you? We're family. That word again, family. I let out a slow breath and smiled, not cry, not smugly, just weary, funny, I said. 15 years of silence doesn't sound much like family, but sure, now that there's money on the table. Suddenly we're related again. Mr. Halpern closed the folder with a soft final snap. The will is airtight. Mr. Carlton was very specific. Any contest will be dismissed immediately. My mother opened her mouth, then thought better of it. The disbelief on their faces curdled into anger. The same look they'd worn years ago when they realized I no longer needed their permission to exist. I smoothed the front of my dress and stood. If you'll excuse me, I have things to take care of. Halpern, thank you for your time. Jasmine hissed. This isn't over. I met her gaze evenly. It was over when you stopped calling me your sister. Then I turned and walked out. Outside, the air felt new, sharper, cleaner, as if the world had been holding its breath and finally exhaled for me. Sunlight bounced off the building's glass facade, momentarily blinding. And in that flash, I saw myself. Not the scared 13-year-old with a backpack waiting for someone who never came, but a woman standing on her own ground exactly where she chose to be. I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, and found the contact I still wished existed. Wish you were here to see their faces, old man, I typed. Then, after a pause, you were right. I wrote my own chapter. I hit send to nowhere, to everywhere. Later that week, I stood on the balcony of Richard's house, my house now, watching the city lights shimmer like the heartbeat of everything he'd built and left behind. I held the journal, flipping to its final page once more. The ink had faded a little, but the words still burned bright. If they ever try to erase you again, remember this. You've already written your own chapter. I smiled. I did. I whispered, and I'll keep writing. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about money or deeds or assets. I was thinking about that 13-year-old girl on a porch clutching a backpack and a fridge note, wondering what she'd done wrong. If I could reach back to her now, I'd tell her this. One day, you'll have a home that doesn't treat you like a visitor. A life that never apologizes for taking up space, and a name no one overlooks. Ethan stepped out onto the balcony, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You okay? I nodded, leaning into him. Yeah, just feels like full circle. He looked out at the city spread beneath us. He'd be proud, you know. I tilted my face toward the sky, soft blue above the skyline. I think he already is, below us. The city lights shimmered like turning pages, and for the first time, the story belonged entirely and irrevocably to me.